It started as just another quiet morning at the clinic. The waiting room buzzed with low murmurs, the shuffle of magazines, and the occasional cough. A girl, maybe 13 or 14, sat quietly next to a man in his early 40s, her father, it seemed. She was dressed in a simple hoodie, her sleeves pulled tightly over her hands, her head slightly lowered. Nothing unusual on the surface. But if you looked closer, something didn't feel right. She was unusually tense, flinching slightly every time her father moved or spoke. Her eyes darted around the room, avoiding his gaze, avoiding everyone's gaze. It was subtle, too subtle for most to notice. But not for Dr. Amanda Lee. Dr. Lee had worked at this clinic for over 10 years. She had seen all kinds of families, all kinds of stories. But something about this girl's body language tugged at her. It was the way she clutched her stomach when she thought no one was watching. The way she hesitated before answering even the simplest questions. The way her father kept answering for her. He smiled too much, talked too confidently, and brushed off any concerns a little too quickly. It wasn't that he did anything overtly wrong. It was the quiet tension between them that made something feel off. When Dr. Lee finally called them in, the father walked in first, talking about how his daughter had been having a little stomach trouble, nothing serious. The girl followed silently behind. Dr. Lee tried to direct her questions to the girl, but the father kept jumping in. "She's just shy," he chuckled when his daughter paused before speaking. "She's always been a bit sensitive." He kept smiling, trying to make light of the situation, but there was a strange edge to it. Too rehearsed. Too controlled. The girl barely spoke during the first few minutes of the consultation. When she did, her voice was soft, almost a whisper. She mentioned pain in her lower abdomen that had been coming and going for a few weeks. No vomiting. No fever. But the way she winced when Dr. Lee gently pressed around her stomach area told a different story. Dr. Lee asked the father to step out for a moment so she could do a quick ultrasound without distractions. He hesitated, then finally nodded and left the room. As soon as the door closed, the girl's shoulders dropped slightly, as if a weight had been lifted. She didn't say anything, but her eyes looked at Dr. Lee with a mix of fear and relief. That look alone confirmed it. Something was deeply wrong here. Dr. Lee spoke gently, reassuring her that she was safe, that no one would hurt her here. The girl nodded, but still said nothing. It was clear that trust would take time. Dr. Lee applied the gel and began the ultrasound. The monitor flickered to life, displaying black and white images that slowly came into focus. At first, everything seemed ordinary, until it didn't. Dr. Lee's hand froze mid-scan. Her eyes widened slightly. She adjusted the probe and looked again. Something wasn't right. The image on the screen made her heart race. It wasn't a stomach bug. It wasn't food poisoning. It was something she hadn't expected at all. She took a deep breath and kept her face calm, not wanting to alarm the girl just yet. "Just a moment," she said quietly, trying to keep her voice steady. She needed to confirm what she was seeing. She turned the screen slightly away from the girl and leaned in, looking again. There it was, clearer this time. Her stomach flipped. She had to be sure. Could it be? Was it really what she thought? The scan didn't lie. She glanced back at the girl, who now seemed more scared than ever. "Am I okay?" the girl whispered, her voice trembling. Dr. Lee swallowed hard. This wasn't something she could explain in just a few words. Not without knowing more. Not with the girl still so scared. And definitely not with the father just outside the door. She gave the girl a small nod. "You're not in danger right now. But I need to ask you a few more questions, okay?" The girl hesitated, then nodded. The questions were gentle. Nothing invasive. Just enough to begin connecting the dots. And slowly, piece by piece, a disturbing picture started to form. One that made Dr. Lee's stomach turn. The girl's answers were fragmented, but they carried weight. Too much for someone her age. She kept looking at the door, terrified her father might walk in at any second. Dr. Lee reassured her again, promising her that she was safe, that she was being listened to. Then came the next problem: what to do next. Legally, medically, ethically, Dr. Lee was trained for moments like this, but it never made them easier. She knew she had to follow protocol, alert the proper channels, ensure the girl got help. But first, she needed to keep things calm. She couldn't let the father suspect that anything had been discovered, not yet. Not until the girl was somewhere safe. She stepped out of the room, took a breath, and called for one of the clinic's counselors. Then she turned back to the father, who stood up too quickly, smiling that same overconfident smile. "So? It's just something she ate, right?" Dr. Lee forced a neutral smile. "We're still looking into it. I just need a few more tests." Thank you for waiting. She ushered him back into the waiting room, trying not to show the growing urgency in her chest. She knew that this was no longer just a medical case. It was something bigger, something darker, and every second mattered. Inside the room, the girl sat silently, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked up when the counselor entered, her eyes wide with fear. But something in her expression also changed, just slightly. A flicker of hope. Maybe for the first time in a long time, someone was listening. Someone believed her. And yet, even with this small spark of hope, the questions kept piling up. Who was this man really? What had this girl been through? And most importantly, was she in immediate danger? Dr. Lee stood just outside the room, her mind racing. The skin kept replaying in her head. The girl's face. Her silence. The fear. This wasn't over. Not even close. Because what the ultrasound revealed would change everything. Dr. Lee stood still for a long moment outside the room, trying to gather her thoughts. The hallway was quiet, but her heart was racing. She had seen many things in her years as a doctor, but what she saw on that ultrasound, what it implied, wasn't something she could just shake off. She couldn't jump to conclusions, but she also couldn't ignore what her instincts were screaming. Something was deeply wrong, and that young girl sitting silently in the exam room, she was at the center of it. Back in the waiting room, the man, presumably the girl's father, was scrolling casually on his phone, legs crossed, acting as if everything was perfectly normal. He looked up and gave Dr. Lee a quick smile, the kind that was too easy, too smooth. She forced herself to return it politely, then walked down the hallway to a private office. She needed to document everything, what the girl said, the scan results, her own observations. Every detail could matter later. The worst thing would be to overlook something that could protect the girl. Inside the exam room, the girl sat with the counselor, a soft-spoken woman named Sarah, who had worked with at-risk youth for years. Sarah gently asked questions, careful not to push too hard. The girl responded in fragments, her words like pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit together, yet. She avoided naming anyone, avoided direct answers, but there were little slips. A word here, a glance there. She mentioned rules at home that didn't sound like typical house rules. She talked about being watched all the time, about not being allowed to use the phone or see friends. And then there was the way she talked about pain. She didn't just mean the physical kind. There was a different weight in her voice, a silence that followed her words like an echo. Sarah could tell that she wanted to say more, that she needed to, but fear had built walls around her. Walls that wouldn't fall easily. Dr. Lee returned to the room after a few minutes and pulled Sarah aside. "What do you think?" she asked quietly. "She's scared," Sarah whispered back. "Very scared. She won't open up yet. But something's not right at home. I can feel it." Dr. Lee nodded. "And the ultrasound?" Sarah asked. Dr. Lee hesitated. "There's something there," she said carefully. "It's not normal abdominal pain, but I want a specialist to confirm before I say more. I'll order more imaging. She needs to be seen without him present." Meanwhile, the man in the waiting room was starting to grow restless. He got up, paced a little, then walked to the reception desk. "Excuse me," he said with a practiced smile. "Just wondering how much longer this is going to take? My daughter gets nervous around doctors." The receptionist offered a polite answer. "It shouldn't be too long. The doctor just needs a few more tests." He nodded and went back to his seat. But he was watching everything now, eyes scanning the hallway, checking who walked in and out of each door. That smooth smile stayed on his face, but there was a different look in his eyes. More alert, more calculating. Dr. Lee decided to bring in another colleague, Dr. Mehta, someone she trusted completely. She showed him the ultrasound images, carefully explaining her concerns without jumping to any assumptions. Dr. Mehta studied the screen for a long moment, then looked at her with a tight expression. "You need to call it in," he said quietly. "This can't wait." "I know," Dr. Lee replied, "but I want to make sure she's safe before we move forward. I don't want him taking her and disappearing." The plan was simple. Keep the girl in the clinic under the pretense of further testing, while the authorities and child protection services were notified. But nothing about this situation felt simple. Every move had to be careful. If the man sensed something was wrong, he might vanish before they had time to act. As Dr. Lee returned to the exam room, the girl looked up at her with those same wide eyes. There was a quiet understanding in them now. She didn't say anything, but she didn't need to. She knew Dr. Lee had seen something. She knew someone finally believed her. "We're going to do another scan," Dr. Lee said gently, "just to make sure everything is okay inside. Nothing scary, I promise. Just pictures. You're doing really well. The girl nodded slightly. Dr. Lee stepped outside and called the front desk. Don't let the father leave, she said softly but firmly. Tell him we're running one more test. Buy us time. Back in the waiting room, the receptionist approached the man. Sir, the doctor just needs to run an additional scan. It shouldn't take long. You can wait here, or step out and come back in a few minutes if you prefer. He looked annoyed, but not suspicious. I'll wait, he said quickly. Inside, the second scan was underway. Dr. Mehta took over, confirming what Dr. Lee had suspected. The screen showed more than just stomach issues. There was a medical situation that demanded further attention, one that simply couldn't be explained away. It raised even more questions about what this girl had been through and what kind of environment she was living in. Sarah sat nearby, holding the girl's hand. Her voice was calm, steady. You're doing great. Just a little more and then we'll let you rest, okay? The girl gave a small nod, but her grip tightened. She was scared again. Will he be mad? She whispered. Sarah didn't lie. You're safe here. No one can hurt you right now. We're here to help. Outside the clinic, a quiet car had just pulled into the parking lot. Inside were two people from Child Protective Services. They had been briefed quickly over the phone, but what they knew so far was just the surface. They walked in quietly, not drawing attention. The receptionist buzzed Dr. Lee. They're here, she said. Dr. Lee gave a quiet nod and turned back to Sarah and Dr. Mehta. It's time, she said. But as they began making preparations to move the girl to another room for her protection, something unexpected happened. The father suddenly stood up in the waiting room. He looked out the window, then turned to the desk. Actually, I just remembered, we've got somewhere to be. Can you tell the doctor we'll come back another day? The receptionist smiled nervously. Sir, your daughter is mid-procedure. She really can't leave just yet. His smile faded. I said we need to go. Behind the scenes, Dr. Lee heard the exchange. Her heart dropped. He knew. Or at least, he sensed something was off. And if he tried to leave now, the situation could spiral. She looked at Sarah. Keep her calm, she whispered. Then she walked briskly to the hallway door. But just as she stepped into the corridor, she saw the man had left the waiting room. The chair where he had been sitting was empty. The door to the parking lot was wide open. He was gone. And so were the answers. Dr. Lee rushed through the hallway, her shoes echoing sharply against the linoleum floor. The front door still swayed slightly on its hinges, as if mocking her with its slow, lazy movement. Her eyes scanned the parking lot beyond the glass. The man's car was gone. No taillights. No screeching tires. He'd slipped out fast, too fast. Her stomach dropped. She had known they were cutting it close, but she hadn't expected him to vanish in under a minute. He must have sensed something. A glance, a tone, or maybe just that sixth sense people get when they've spent too long hiding things. She grabbed her phone and called security first, then the CPS agents already inside. He's gone, she said, trying to keep her voice even. He walked out. He knew. One of the agents, a woman named Monica, cursed under her breath. We'll alert local law enforcement right away. Send us the details, vehicle description, plates, anything you have. Back inside the clinic, Sarah stayed with the girl, who was now sitting up on the exam table, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Is he coming back? She asked in a small voice. Sarah glanced toward the hallway, then back at her. Not today, she said gently. You're safe now. We're going to take care of you. But even those words felt fragile, because truthfully, they didn't know what would happen next. The man was gone, and they still didn't even know who he really was. The girl had only referred to him as my dad, but there had been no official paperwork, no medical history, no ID shown at the front desk. They had just accepted it, like most clinics did when an adult brought in a child. There was trust in that system, a trust that was now clearly broken. Detectives arrived not long after, gathering statements, checking camera footage from outside. One of the officers, Detective Ramos, stood in the hallway with Dr. Lee, flipping through notes on a small pad. You're sure he was her father? He asked. Dr. Lee shook her head. She called him that, but I'm not sure. There's something strange about the dynamic between them. Too much control, too little emotion from her. And the scan, it showed evidence that she's been through more than just abdominal pain. Ramos frowned. Could be trafficking, he said, almost to himself. Or a guardian that's hiding something. We've seen it before. Kids taken in, kept isolated. Told what to say. It can take months to unravel. Back in the exam room, the girl finally spoke again, her voice barely audible. I'm sorry, she whispered. Sarah leaned in gently. You don't need to be sorry for anything. I should have said something sooner, but I didn't know who to trust. Sarah nodded slowly. It's okay. You said something now. That's what matters. The girl started to cry quietly, the kind of tears that had clearly been held back for a long time. It wasn't just fear anymore, it was release. A slow unspooling of everything she'd carried alone. But even as she opened up slightly, she still held back key details. No names. No exact addresses. Just vague comments about moving a lot. Living in other people's houses. Being told not to ask questions. That if she did, things would get worse. Later that afternoon, she was taken to a safe facility, one with trained staff and counselors who specialized in cases like hers. Sarah went with her, at the girl's request. As they drove away, Dr. Lee stood by the window of her office, watching the clinic parking lot slowly empty out. The building was quieter now, but her mind was far from calm. That night, Dr. Lee sat at her kitchen table, the day still looping in her head. She kept thinking about the scan, about the girl's expression when she was asked if she was in pain. And she kept hearing the man's voice, too smooth, too prepared. There was something off about the entire setup from the start. No insurance info. No emergency contact. And yet, he seemed confident no one would question him. The next morning, a call came in early. Detective Ramos had traced the car. It had been registered under a fake name, using an out-of-state license that turned out to be counterfeit. But the plates were caught on a nearby traffic camera. He had headed west, toward the interstate. No further sightings after that. They began cross-referencing the girl's partial story with missing persons reports, old school records, anything they could find. Days passed, and bits and pieces started to emerge. The girl had once been enrolled in a school 2 towns away under a different last name. Before that, another school even farther, again under a new name. No consistent medical history. No official guardianship papers on file. Just a trail of gaps. Meanwhile, Sarah worked closely with the girl, who was now starting to trust her more. The girl still didn't reveal everything, but she began drawing pictures during her sessions, quiet, haunting sketches that showed what her words couldn't yet express. One picture showed a small figure locked behind a door. Another showed a man standing in the shadows, always watching. But then something else happened. Another layer to the story began to form. A woman showed up at the clinic 2 weeks later, holding a faded photo. She said she'd seen the girl's face on a missing child alert that had quietly gone out to foster networks. The photo she carried showed a much younger version of the girl, smiling, with long braided hair. She said she used to be her neighbor. She remembered the girl disappearing suddenly a few years ago. She lived next door to me in Riverside, the woman said. One day she was there, the next she was gone. No goodbye, no notice. I asked around, but people just said the family moved. The investigators took the lead from there, digging into old files. Eventually, a social worker confirmed that the girl's biological mother had lost custody years ago due to mental health issues and unstable housing. The girl had been placed in temporary care until she went missing during a transition between foster homes. The file had gone cold. No solid leads. Just another name on a long list. Now, with new information and a living witness, the pieces were starting to form a clearer picture. But questions still swirled. Who was the man that brought her to the clinic? How did he get custody of her, if he ever really had it at all? Was he acting alone, or was there a network? And perhaps most disturbing of all, why did he feel confident enough to bring her to a public clinic? Dr. Lee couldn't shake that last question. It suggested either arrogance or planning. He had assumed no one would notice, that no one would ask too many questions. Maybe he had done it before. Maybe he thought she wouldn't speak up, or couldn't. And if that was true, then there might be others. Other girls. Other stories. Hidden in plain sight. As the days stretched into weeks, the girl slowly opened up more. She remembered small details, towns, street names, even a pet from one of the homes. She still didn't remember everything, or maybe she just couldn't say it yet. Trauma works like that, Sarah explained. Memory comes in fragments, especially when you've spent years trying to survive. But just as the investigation was beginning to gain momentum, another strange twist came in. A letter arrived at the clinic, addressed to Dr. Lee. No return address. No name. Just a short note, typed on plain paper. Stop asking questions. She's not yours to save. Dr. Lee read the words again and again. Her hands trembled, but not from fear. From fury. Because this wasn't just about one girl anymore. This was about whoever believed they had the right to hide in the shadows, and the people who were finally shining a light. Dr. Lee sat in her office long after everyone else had gone home. The clinic lights were dim, the only sound coming from the hum of the HVAC and the distant ticking of the wall clock. The letter still sat on her desk, the plain white paper seeming louder than anything else in the room. Stop asking questions. She's not yours to save. The message was short, but it rattled her more than she wanted to admit. Someone had gone out of their way to find the clinic, find her name, and send that threat. This wasn't random. It was targeted. She thought about the girl, now safely in protective custody. Or at least, that's what they hoped. But safety felt like a fragile word now. Whoever this man was, if he was even her real father, he hadn't just vanished. He had a plan. He had resources. He had confidence. And he was watching. The investigators had been working every angle. Detective Ramos and his team had uncovered 2 other cold cases, girls around the same age who'd gone missing from nearby counties under similar conditions. No clear abduction. No break-ins. Just sudden, unexplained disappearances. In one case, a neighbor remembered seeing a man helping the girl into a car, like a family trip. In another, a school said the child was withdrawn for personal reasons, but no one followed up. Each story was thin, with no solid leads. But when placed side by side, the patterns were hard to ignore. And then came a breakthrough, an old surveillance photo from a grocery store 3 towns away. The missing girl from the second cold case was captured on camera with a man. His face was blurry, but his build, posture, even his hairstyle matched the description of the man from the clinic. Same type of casual clothing. Same relaxed, unbothered body language. And the girl? She looked scared, even while picking apples. She kept her head low, eyes darting around. Detective Ramos brought the photo to Dr. Lee the next morning. "We think it's him," he said. "No fingerprints, no confirmed ID yet. But he's moved through this area more than once." Dr. Lee leaned in, studying the image. "How many girls do you think there could be?" Ramos was quiet for a second. "We don't know. Could be 2. Could be 10. We're digging into more foster home records, especially the ones where kids slip through during transitions. The system loses track sometimes. People take advantage of that." Meanwhile, Sarah was spending more time with the girl, who they now knew was named Maya. It had taken nearly 2 weeks for her to say it out loud, and even then, she had whispered it like a secret she wasn't supposed to tell. But with that one word, her name, more started to come out. Her drawings got more detailed. She described a small blue trailer where they had lived for a while, a gas station with a giant red rooster out front, a woman named Miss Laney who used to braid her hair before she disappeared, too. Maya's memories weren't in order, but they were powerful. She started waking up in the middle of the night, screaming. Sometimes she said nothing, other times she cried out, "He's coming." The shelter workers tried to reassure her, but Maya was convinced he could still find her. And maybe she was right. One afternoon, as Sarah sat with her in the small therapy room at the shelter, Maya handed her a crumpled page from a notebook. On it, she had drawn something new, a symbol, a small bird in a cage with its wings bleeding. Below it, the words, "He says I'm safest in the dark." Sarah looked at the image, then at Maya. "Did he say that to you?" Maya nodded slowly. "He said outside is bad, that I'll get hurt if I ever leave." Sarah's heart clenched. Whoever this man was, he had convinced Maya that she belonged in captivity, that the world was dangerous, but he was the protector. It was a twisted form of control, psychological as much as physical. Dr. Lee received another letter 2 days later. This one was delivered by hand. No postage, no return address. Just found tucked under the clinic's front door in the early morning. It said, "You should have stayed out of it. This wasn't your fight." By now, the police were watching the clinic more closely. Cameras were installed. Staff was told to report anything unusual. But there was no sign of him. It was like chasing a shadow. Every time they got close, he slipped away again. Then, a phone call changed everything. The clerk at a motel off Highway 22 called to report something strange. A man had checked in with a young girl a few nights ago, but something about their interaction felt off. The girl never left the room. The man kept the blinds shut and always asked for extra locks. When he left for food, it was always fast, and he never let staff clean the room. The clerk had seen a news brief about the missing child cases and decided to call. Detectives moved fast. By the time they got there, the room was empty, but there were signs someone had been there recently. Toys, food wrappers, a girl's jacket. Most importantly, a small notebook left behind with pages torn out, but one remained. On it, the bird in the cage again, drawn by the same hand as Maya's. Dr. Lee stared at the notebook when they brought it to her. He has another one, she whispered. Or maybe more than one. Now the focus shifted. Not just to Maya's case, but to the network. Law enforcement opened a full investigation into potential trafficking. The man, whoever he was, might be part of something bigger, something that exploited the cracks in the system. Foster care, shelters, transitions between homes. Kids that no one checked up on. Some never even reported missing because their records were incomplete. And yet, with all that building tension, Maya remained the key. The trauma she carried was still deep, but her memory was slowly forming a map. She began drawing buildings, rooms, doorways. One sketch showed a woman's hand with a bracelet she helped me hide once, Maya said softly. That little detail gave the detectives a new lead. In another drawing, there was a man's wallet with a logo on it, like a badge, maybe security-related. He said he used to work in a place with cameras, Maya mumbled. Sarah and Dr. Lee knew she was trying. Every sketch, every whispered detail was a breadcrumb. But they also knew the man was still out there, and now he was angry. And then, one late evening, a call came and that sent a shiver through everyone involved. Maya had gone missing from the shelter. She had been there just hours before, seen by the staff, eating her dinner. No sign of distress. But now, her bed was empty. No one saw her leave. There were no signs of forced entry. No broken windows. No struggle. Just a quiet space where a girl should have been and wasn't. Panic spread quickly. Law enforcement was dispatched within minutes. Roads were checked. The surrounding area swept. Amber alerts updated. But no trace. It was like she had vanished again, just like before. Dr. Lee felt the weight hit her chest like a stone. After everything, after every effort to protect her, she was gone. And this time, it felt even more personal. The man hadn't just slipped through their fingers. He had reached back in and taken her from right under their noses. Sarah sat in the therapy room, staring at the last drawing Maya had left on the table, a picture of herself, standing alone at a bus stop under a starless sky. No sign of escape. Just a small line at the bottom. He says I still belong to him. The tension was now unbearable. Everyone was racing against time. The man knew how to hide, and worse, he knew how to manipulate. Maya might believe she had no choice. She might have gone with him willingly, out of fear, out of conditioning. Or maybe she had been taken. No one knew for sure. But one thing was certain, this was no longer about one girl or one clinic visit. This was about a predator who believed he was untouchable. And now, the final move was his. Rain began to fall that night, steady and cold, tapping against the windows of the clinic like fingers trying to get in. Dr. Lee didn't leave. She stayed curled up in the break room, phone in hand, replaying the same questions in her mind. Where was Maya? How had he found her again? And how did no one see it coming? Detective Ramos was at the shelter, questioning every staff member, checking every camera feed. But nothing. No car, no footage, no witnesses. Maya had simply vanished. They suspected the man, of course. Who else? But there was no proof yet. And worse, a chilling thought had begun to take shape. What if someone inside the system had helped him? Back at the shelter, one of the staff members finally admitted something odd. Earlier that day, a woman had come by asking about volunteer opportunities. She had a warm smile and said she'd heard about the shelter through a friend. No one thought much of it. She signed the visitor sheet and was shown around briefly. But now that woman's name, Karen Lewis, was nowhere to be found in any database. The number she left was disconnected. And when they checked the security footage again, they saw her walking down the hall near Maya's room. Nothing overt. Just a passing glance. But the timeline matched. She'd been there just before Maya went missing. The possibility hit everyone hard. This wasn't just one man working alone. There was someone helping him, maybe even more than one person. This woman, whoever she was, had gained access easily. She knew what to ask, how to talk, how to blend in. It explained the smoothness of the operation. It explained why they always seemed a step ahead. The next morning, Dr. Lee received an email with no sender and no subject. The message was brief, but the words chilled her more than the handwritten letters. You still think she's your responsibility, but you were only ever a detour. She belongs with us now. Us. That word made her stomach twist. Meanwhile, Sarah tried to hold herself together. She hadn't stopped thinking about Maya since the moment she heard she was gone. She felt like she had failed her. Every drawing, every whispered memory, all of it was supposed to lead Maya toward healing, not back into the shadows. She couldn't shake the idea that Maya hadn't been taken by force, at least not entirely. The psychological grip that man had over her was stronger than they realized. He'd made her believe the outside world was dangerous, that anyone trying to help her was the enemy. And now someone else had stepped in, someone playing the part of a savior just long enough to take her back. Detective Ramos took the new lead seriously. He circulated the shelter footage across other law enforcement networks. And within a day, they got something back. The same woman had been seen near a courthouse in a neighboring county 6 months ago. There, she'd posed as a court-appointed advocate for children. Same smile, same voice, same fake credentials. No one had questioned her. She'd even escorted a child to a meeting and was never seen again. Now, everything was unraveling fast. A new team was brought in, federal agents with experience in child trafficking and psychological coercion. They believed the man wasn't a rogue abuser. He was part of a structured, calculated operation. They targeted kids who fell through the cracks: orphans, runaways, those without stable paperwork. They moved often, switched identities, used fake charities as cover. They convinced the kids that they were being saved, not taken. It wasn't just physical captivity, it was mental imprisonment. Dr. Lee sat down with the task force, sharing every detail from the day Maya walked into her clinic. She still had the ultrasound images. She described Maya's body language, her odd silence, the way the man talked over her, always answering questions for her. And she showed them the drawings, hundreds of them now, each one a small cry for help disguised as art. One of the agents leaned in when he saw a specific sketch. "That," he said, pointing. "That symbol. We've seen it before." It was the bird in the cage again. But this time, Maya had added a circle around it, with jagged lines that almost looked like sun rays. The agent pulled out his phone and showed them a similar marking, found on the wall of an abandoned foster home raided months ago. Same design, different state. No suspects ever caught. "It's a mark," the agent said quietly. "Some kind of signature, like a calling card." They were dealing with something organized, something underground and careful. As the investigation expanded, a second twist hit them hard, and it came from Maya herself. Or rather, from someone claiming to be her. A new video appeared online. It was posted to an obscure forum often used by underground groups. In the shaky footage, a girl who looked like Maya sat on a couch, her face tired, her voice quiet. "I'm safe," she said. "I went back because I wanted to. They're my family. I don't want to be found." It felt scripted, forced. Her eyes flickered constantly, and she looked to the side more than once, as if someone was standing just off camera. The agents froze the frame, examined every detail, the background, the clothes, the lighting. It wasn't live. It had been pre-recorded, probably in a temporary location. But what stood out most was what she said at the end. "They lied to you. I was never in danger." That single sentence was a knife to Sarah's chest. She knew it wasn't true. Maya had cried in her arms. She had drawn pictures of being trapped. She had flinched at loud noises. That fear wasn't fake. But now, whoever took her was trying to rewrite the story. They wanted the world to think she was fine, that she belonged there. The video was pulled down within hours, but not before investigators downloaded and traced it. The signal bounced through several countries, a web of redirections designed to stall any effort to pinpoint the source. But something small slipped through, a timestamp in the file's metadata. It matched the hour she disappeared. It confirmed what they feared. Maya hadn't just left willingly. She had been coached to cover her tracks. The public didn't know the full story, but rumors had started to swirl. News stories were picking up on the investigation. The media called it a potential trafficking ring hiding behind the foster care system. Parents of missing children started coming forward. More names, more faces, more symbols. Sarah was approached by a mother who had lost her daughter 5 years ago under similar circumstances. The child had been placed in temporary foster care after the mother's hospitalization. When she recovered and tried to regain custody, her daughter was already gone. The foster parent had disappeared too. That case had gone cold. But now, this mother was holding a drawing. It was almost identical to one of Maya's, same cage bird, same broken wings. It wasn't just Maya. It never had been. Now, the race wasn't just to find her. It was to uncover a hidden operation that had been running for years, right under everyone's nose. And just as the agents were beginning to link the cases together, another message arrived. This time delivered not to the clinic, but to Sarah's apartment. Taped to her front door was a single photo. Maya, standing in front of a dirty motel curtain. And beneath it, a sentence scrawled in red ink. "You brought her into the light. But she was safer in the dark." It was a warning, but also a dare. They weren't done. And now, it wasn't just about saving Maya. It was about stopping a system designed to make her, and girls like her, disappear. The photo taped to Sarah's door didn't just feel like a warning, it felt like a final move. They were letting her know that they still held control. That despite the investigation, the man and his network were always a step ahead. Sarah stared at the picture, heart pounding, trying to absorb every detail. The dingy curtain behind Maya, the chipped paint on the motel wall, even the crooked line of tape at the corner of the photograph. Somewhere in that image, there had to be a clue. She rushed the photo to the task force. The agents examined it carefully, scanning it for location markers, digital fingerprints, anything that could help. One of them noticed a small number at the bottom corner, barely visible. It looked like part of a room number, 17. Combined with the curtain pattern, they began comparing it to old motel directories in nearby towns. It didn't take long before something matched. A rundown motel 2 hours away had rooms with the exact same curtains, same paint color. And yes, room 17 was still in use. By the time law enforcement arrived, the motel manager had already checked someone out that morning. A man and a girl. No names, paid in cash. The room had been left spotless, too spotless. Wiped down, no trash, no fingerprints. But someone had missed something. Inside the vent, hidden behind the cover, was a crumpled napkin, and written in pencil, barely legible, "Please find me." That was all they needed. The urgency was real now. The agents followed the trail fast, pinging cell towers, tracking bus station security, checking traffic cameras. And finally, a break. They caught a glimpse of Maya on a highway gas station camera. She was with the woman from the shelter, Karen Lewis, getting snacks. The man wasn't there, but the woman seemed calm, like this was just another trip. Dr. Lee, still recovering from the emotional strain of it all, sat in the command center while the officers prepped. A sting operation was set in motion, coordinated across multiple agencies. They believed they had pinpointed the safe house. A house on the edge of a remote farm property, surrounded by woods, with no neighbors for miles. It was listed under a shell company that had ties to 3 other known locations used by traffickers. Sarah stood at the edge of the planning room, watching the agents mark entry points on a map. Her thoughts were on Maya, what she must be feeling, how scared she might be. And what if they were wrong? What if by the time they got there, it would be too late? The operation moved before dawn. In the thick of early morning mist, law enforcement vehicles surrounded the property. Silence hung in the air for one long moment before they made their move. They breached the front door, calling out loudly. Within seconds, people inside scrambled, footsteps echoed, a door slammed, something shattered. They found the woman Karen, trying to escape through a back hallway, dragging Maya by the wrist. She froze when she saw the officers, but then did something no one expected. She shoved Maya forward, raised her hands, and screamed, "I was helping her. I swear." "He made me do it." Maya fell to the ground, covering her face, trembling. Agents rushed to separate them, handcuffing the woman and leading her away. But they didn't stop there. Inside the house, they found rooms with padlocks, hidden compartments in the walls, piles of forged documents. The space was rigged to vanish at any moment. Blank birth certificates, IDs, transport logs, everything pointed to a wide network that spanned multiple states. And in the basement, they found a second girl, younger than Maya, dirty, scared, and completely silent. No one had even reported her missing. Sarah arrived at the scene minutes after the raid ended. Maya had been taken to a safe area, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes red but finally filled with something new, hope. When she saw Sarah, she didn't run or hide. She simply held out her arms. Sarah didn't ask questions. She just held her. Later that morning, as agents processed the evidence and took statements, Maya began to talk. Slowly, carefully. She described the man again, how he told her the world was full of liars, how he punished her if she mentioned her past. But she also said something unexpected, that the woman, Karen, wasn't always cruel. In fact, in quiet moments, she had shown kindness, given Maya extra food, let her keep her drawings, even helped her slip that note into the vent. It complicated things. Karen, now in custody, was being questioned. And under pressure, she cracked. She admitted she had once been a victim herself, taken when she was just a teenager. The man had kept her hidden for years, trained her to recruit others. He had a way of breaking people down until they thought there was no escape. Her story matched others, different names, different towns, but the same methods. Over time, she became part of the machine. Not because she wanted to, but because it felt like the only way to survive. Still, she had crossed a line, and now she would face justice. The man, whose real name was finally discovered through documents in the basement, was still missing. But with the information recovered, the network began to unravel. More locations were raided. More victims were rescued. It wasn't over, but it was finally beginning to fall apart. Maya, back in protective care and surrounded by familiar faces, began the long process of healing again. But something had shifted. She wasn't afraid all the time anymore. She smiled more. She asked about school. She even talked about maybe becoming an artist one day. Dr. Lee met her again a week after the rescue. Maya sat quietly, sketching something new. This time, it wasn't the caged bird. It was the bird flying. She said, "I'm free now," Maya whispered, referring to Sarah. Dr. Lee smiled. "You always were. You just forgot for a while." It felt like the story was coming to an end. But then, just as things were settling, Sarah received a package. No return address, no postage. Inside was a small music box, the same one Maya had described from her time in captivity. When opened, it played a haunting melody. And beneath the lid, carved into the wood, were 3 words, "Still watching." Always. The twist hit like a thunderclap. Even though the operation was exposed, even though girls had been rescued, the man was still out there. And he wanted them to know it. He was reminding them that he was still a ghost in the shadows. Still one step ahead. Sarah handed the box over to authorities. It would be dusted for prints, tested for any clues. But deep down, they all knew what it meant. The story wasn't over. Not yet. The music box was the last reminder that even when you think it's over, some shadows remain. But despite the fear that tried to claw its way back, Sarah didn't let it control her. Neither did Maya. That little wooden box, with its eerie tune and message, was turned over to the agents immediately. And then it was left behind, just like the darkness that had tried to define them. Over the next few weeks, everything began to shift. Maya was moved to a new, secure home with a foster family that had been carefully vetted. This time, every step was handled with precision, care, and honesty. The trauma didn't vanish overnight, and no one expected it to. But Maya was surrounded by people who truly wanted her to heal, people who didn't just see her as a case, but as a person with a future. Dr. Lee continued to support her through sessions, this time without the panic that had once gripped the room. Maya started to speak more, express herself more freely, and even laugh again. The drawings changed too. There were still birds, but they were no longer in cages. They flew through skies filled with color and movement. Some perched on windows, others soared above trees. Each one showed a little more of who Maya was becoming. The shelter where she had once stayed also underwent big changes. After what had happened, new training programs were added. Security systems were upgraded. Staff were educated on how trafficking rings operate, not just the physical signs, but the emotional cues that often go unnoticed. Maya's story had become the reason dozens of other children were treated with even more vigilance, compassion, and attention. Karen, the woman who had helped abduct Maya, remained in custody. Her story complicated things. She was both a victim and an accomplice, and the legal process took time to sort it all out. But her cooperation was instrumental in helping authorities identify more members of the trafficking network. She provided names, locations, and a better understanding of how they operated. It didn't excuse what she'd done, but it meant fewer children would go through what she had. The task force that handled Maya's case expanded their work across state lines. Over the following months, they dismantled several smaller branches of the operation. Dozens of children were found and brought to safety. Some had been missing for years, presumed gone forever. Others had just slipped through cracks that shouldn't have existed in the first place. And as for the man, the one who had started it all, he was never found. His name was out in the system now, his face on every database. But he had vanished, gone underground, just like before. The authorities believed he would resurface. People like him always did. But now the world knew what to look for. He was no longer invisible. Sarah continued to volunteer at the shelter, though she now also worked closely with survivor advocacy groups. Maya's story had changed her. It reminded her how fragile trust could be and how easily systems failed. But it also showed her the power of listening, of patience, of being there for someone, even when their pain didn't make sense to you. One day, Sarah visited Maya at her new home. They sat outside, drawing together on the porch, the sun setting behind the trees. You know, Maya said softly, I used to think I'd never feel safe again. Sarah looked over. And now? Maya thought for a moment, her pencil still in her hand. Now I know that even if I'm scared, I don't have to be alone. That moment stayed with Sarah long after she left. It was the kind of truth that didn't need to be big or loud to matter. The clinic that Dr. Lee worked at also saw changes. More funding, more mental health support, more collaboration with child services. What had happened with Maya had exposed weak points, but instead of hiding them, they were addressed head-on. Dr. Lee found herself speaking at conferences, sharing Maya's story in a way that respected her privacy but helped educate others on what warning signs to watch for. In time, Maya was able to return to school. At first, she was shy, unsure of herself. But she had a support system now. Teachers who knew what she'd been through. Friends who didn't ask too many questions. Slowly, she began to find joy in the ordinary: art class, soccer practice, library books. Things most kids take for granted, Maya had learned to treasure. She never forgot what had happened, but she didn't let it define her. Instead, she used it to fuel something bigger. By the time she was 16, she was helping other kids in foster care express themselves through art. She gave them crayons and paper and said, "Draw how you feel. Don't worry if it's messy." Years later, Maya wrote a short story about her life, not the terrible parts, but the pieces of it that brought her back to light. It was published in a school journal, and it ended with a sentence that said, "I used to be a girl in a locked room, but now I'm someone who opens doors." The story left a mark on everyone who read it. In the end, what happened to Maya didn't disappear. It became part of her, yes, but not all of her. She chose what she wanted to carry forward. She let the rest go. And in doing so, she showed everyone around her what real strength looks like, not the kind that's loud and fierce, but the quiet kind that keeps going even when it's hard. The case remained open. The man was still out there, somewhere. But he had lost the most important thing, his ability to hide. He would always be looking over his shoulder now, always wondering when the next door would break down. Because Maya had spoken. She had drawn. She had survived. And that survival had created cracks in his silence. Cracks that would one day break him. And so, the story came to an end. Not with revenge or rescue missions, but with healing, with change, and with the quiet power of people who chose to care. The kind of people who didn't look away, who listened, who stayed. This story reminds us that sometimes a child won't cry out loud. Sometimes they'll draw, or act distant, or flinch when someone raises a hand. And in those moments, it's not just about noticing, it's about acting, believing them, protecting them, even when their words are quiet, even when their fear is hidden in plain sight. Maya's journey wasn't easy, and it wasn't fair, but it was real. And in the end, it mattered. Because someone paid attention, someone asked questions, and someone stayed when it would have been easier to walk away. And that changed everything.